Hey everybody, I wanted to go over this project file with you and show you kind of how I built this. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing that I did was I added a cloner, and then I added some spheres and a cylinder, and I dropped those in the cloner. Right now it's set to grid. If you look at the mode on the actual objects, I want to change that to linear. So now we just have a straight line, and I can repeat these objects over and over. Let me turn down the scales, the radius here of the sphere, and change the height of the cylinder so it's a little bit thinner. The other thing I want to do is if I turn these off, see how these have these hard edges? We need to add more rotation segments. So basically, if I crank this up, you can go up to 100 or even higher if you want, but I'll just keep it around 70 or so. Actually, just leave it at 100, why not? The sphere, you can turn that back on. It's a little big, so just scale this down a little bit, somewhere in there. If I turn on the cloner again, it'll sort them in a linear formation. So this is kind of the base setup that I started with. And from here, what we want to do is add dynamics, and we want to add the growth effect. So the first thing we'll start with is a growth effect, and that's just adding a plane effector. And basically this is going to affect those clones. So if I click on plane and go to fields, I can add a linear field and change its orientation to -y. And right now nothing's happening because I haven't applied it to the cloner. So if I go to the cloner and go to effectors, I can drag this plane effector down in here. Boom. So I'm going to rename this to scale. And let's go in here and animate this linear field. Right now it's pushing them up. I don't want that. I actually want to click on the plane effector, turn off position, and go to scale. Uniform scale, and then go to -1 as the size. The other thing I need to do is go to +y, and so that'll flip the orientation of the linear field. So now they're big at the bottom and small at the top. This is what we need for our effect. I'm gonna pull this down just a little so it's like a tighter fall off, and that's looking pretty good. The biggest thing here is not to let these objects touch necessarily when they're coming on. So I think that's looking good. I'll go into the cloner, change the Y position just a little so they're a little bit closer to each other. That's going to be important later. Okay, so a couple things. Let's go ahead and animate this linear line or this linear field. And if I go into the coordinates and I pull this all the way down, go to the beginning of the timeline, set a keyframe on Y, go to the end, pull it up, pull it up in Y until it reaches the end. That's good. And then I'll do another keyframe. So let's go ahead and try it. Hit play. That's looking pretty good. This is kind of the beginning of our effect. I think you can see it come together a little bit. Let's add in a delay. Instead of me going in menus, probably the easiest way to add objects is to hit Shift-C, and you can actually type whatever you want. So one of the things that we need is a delay. So if I hit enter, it'll add a delay to the scene. We need to add it to the cloner because it just added it to the scene. It didn't add it to the cloner effectors. So if I come in here and add it to delay, I'll put that on the very top. That'll be the first priority. And then under the delay effector, we can go to, let's see, the effector, and then go to blend, and we can crank this up just a little bit. Let's try spring all the way up just so you can see what it does. And it's not doing anything. I might have to speed up my animation just a bit, but let's try this. If I go to blend and pull this down a little, we'll just start there and see what happens. Okay, the last thing I think we need is a push apart. So Shift C, push apart, add that to the cloner, effectors, put it at the bottom. Okay, let's try, see what happens here if we play. Now everything is like all kinds of crazy, and that's not what we want. So let me do this. I'm going to add, click on the cloner and go to tags, simulation, rigid body. And then we need to go to mode down here and go to scene, or you can hit Control or Command D and go to simulation, scene, and make sure your gravity is set to 0, okay? Which it is. If you have objects falling, that's why. So right now these objects are dynamic as they come on, and what we want to do is turn off the delay just to see what that does. So the next thing we need to do is test this out and just see how it's playing. Right now everything's kind of falling and going crazy. Under push apart, if you bring down the radius to like 25 or so, let's just try that and see. That'll calm things down. Now this is closer to what I had. I do want to add in some rotation. So under the plane effector, under parameter, go to rotation. And then we can add in some additional rotation on that effector, and it should give us a little bit better results. Once we got that in. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Under the simulation, or this rigid body tag, under collision, I want to turn geometry accuracy all the way up, and then play again. Okay, this is looking good. The other thing I want to do is add just a few more clones and come in here and add some variation to these cylinders and spheres. So there's a couple of different ways you can do that. Probably the easiest is to add a random effector. Add this to the cloner, stack, and then under random, instead of position, we'll do scale, uniform scale, and this is going to give us some variation on the shapes. The other way to do this, if I turn this off, is to just duplicate these objects in here and scale them up and kind of change the way that they look a little bit so that they are giving us some variation. We'll do the same thing with the sphere, duplicate it again, drag it up a little bit, and let's go back and hit play. Okay, this is kind of the basic setup for our stuff. Under collision shapes, let's change this to convex holes. Try it again. Now it's respecting the geometry shapes, which is good. Okay, so I'm going to bring down the radius of these, add one more, and give us a little bit more variation on those, just so we have a couple small ones. All right, that's looking pretty good. Let me go ahead and go back and hit play so you can see it. Yeah, that's fun. Okay, so you can play with this as much as you want. This push apart has a big influence on how the shapes kind of like react to each other, and you can see that here. That's nice. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is add some materials and lighting. So if I go to plus and go to materials, standard, this is going to add a redshift material. I'm going to make one and call it orange. Let's go in here and make this orange. Click on this RS standard material, go to this guy, red, and then pull it back, and let's just see if we can get some yummy orange color. I like that. The next thing we're going to do is add a max on noise and immediately plug that right into the reflection roughness. Click on the noise and come down here to input and change the scale to about 25. And also I'm going to adjust the contrast just a bit to like 0.5. That's actually pretty high, so maybe 0.25, somewhere in there. And I'm going to apply this to the whole clone, And let's just see what it looks like. Yeah. So in here we can kind of see if I hold down shift and drag, I can get this region, and it's just going to render this region for me. So if I go in here, I can make adjustments now to my max on noise. If I hit the solo button, you can actually see the noise by itself, which is good. But let's take a peek at it with the actual material. I'm going to bring the brightness down just a little. I just want a little bit of variation. Okay, let's try to go up. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I might scale it down just a bit. All right, and let's go to our spheres and add rotation segments. So I'll go to like 128, just so they're actually looking pretty good on the render. All right, so now we have our orange material set up. Let's do another one, call it green. Come in here. One little tip for congruent colors, if you want all your colors to look good together, you can select your hue and your saturation level. I'm sorry, your value and saturation levels, and then shift your hue, and it'll be a color that is congruent with, in this case, the orange. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. It's super strong green. We'll just go with that and see what happens. I'm going to add this to some of the cylinders. Turn off my render view. Let's add another one, and we'll call it glass. And let's add glass to one of the cylinders. Double click it, go inside. If you click on the standard material, go to base and turn that all the way down. That'll give us a start, and then coat, we can go pretty much all the way up and just a little bit of roughness. Actually, let's use this for the roughness. Let's go in here, click and drag onto the RS standard into the reflection roughness. Make sure that's up, and then this one is coat roughness. Okay, so let's change this noise type to something else. Let's try displacement turbulence. Let's try modular. Let's do modular noise. That's what I did in the original. Okay, so I'll go back and hit play. Let them play out for a sec. Okay, now I'll hit render and just see what our textures are starting to look like. I like to do this with actually lighting too, so let's add some lights so we can see what we're doing. Shift C, add a RS dome, or just a dome, I guess. Sometimes they call it RS, sometimes they don't. So we have our dome light there, and now you can kind of see what that's doing. I'm gonna turn off the bucket render, so it'll go a little faster. Add in a RS area light, or RS light. Change it to area as the type. And I'm just gonna move this into place, rotate it a little bit. One little tip that you can do if you want to position your lights accurately, you can click on RS light, go to cameras, go to use camera, and selected object this camera. So now I'm actually looking through this light, which is kind of cool, and I can position it however I want. Okay, so I can position this over here. Let's just start off on the side, kind of top down view. There we go. I'm just trying to like roughly position this. Let's check out, let's actually add a camera to our scene. So let's just add a camera here. Call it camera 1. Let's go inside. Oh. And we can start to get a composition around. One little trick we can do is to rotate this, there we go, and the B, and I have a little bit of an angle on there. So now if, actually I'm upside down, there we go. So now if we play, I'm gonna add my work plane back in just so I can actually see what I'm doing. There we go. And the light is not where I want. So let's grab up here. And I'm going to change the size of the light just a little bit and make it a little bit bigger. Go ahead and hit play. Let's see what this looks like. And I'm going to turn off my dome light so I can actually adjust this. So click on RS light, go back to cameras, use camera, use selected object. Okay, let's move this around. I'm also going to turn up the brightness because it's pretty dim. It's somewhere in here. All right, so now we have like a bare bones lighting setup, which is fine. Turn my dome back on. And I'm going to turn the dome light down just a little bit because it's super bright. Let's add a couple things here. Let's add, go back into our glass material. And let's go down to transmission and crank that all the way up. And that's going to let the light actually pass through that material. And so now you can start to see it a little bit here. Go back into our noise. I'm going to come down here to input output and crank the low clip and just see where we can get with that. Yeah, that's a little bit better. And then the high clip, let's pull that down. Actually, let's leave that because it's not changing it how we want. Okay, there we go. Now you can kind of tweak this noise a little bit to get the effects you want. You can add animation to it. You can change the seed and get like a little bit different value. But that's essentially how I set this up. Okay, let's add another material, and this is going to be an emissive material. So if I go to standard materials, and we'll call this light, we'll just call it emission. Go into my cloner, add this to some of the spheres, turn off my render view, go back into emission, click on standard material, and scroll down to emission and just hit whatever color you want, just change that to 1. So now in our render view, we should see these spheres turn white. That's more what we want. Okay, so the next step, let's add a background. So if I go to these objects and go to plane, pull it all the way down the bottom, change this to positive or negative Z, either one. I'm going to hit E and push this back. And then I'm just going to hit T and scale this up, something around in there. All right, let's go back in our camera. And now we can adjust the camera to be somewhere in here. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Let's take a look at it. All right, this is getting closer to our final result. One thing we need to do is add a background texture. So I'll come in here and add one more material and call this BG. Add it to the plane. Double click the material, go in, turn off the reflection. We don't want those specular highlights. I'm gonna hit play again just so we can see the difference. Now it's kind of a darker background. That's closer to what we were thinking in the original. Let's go back. And instead of playing this out every time, I'm actually going to just get this exactly how I want it and then bake it down. So under push apart, let's add like just a little bit more there. Under the delay, we'll come in here and turn that down just a bit. Okay. You can also add some more rotation if you want. And our linear field, and I'm just gonna select all this stuff, hit Alt-G, which is a super useful shortcut, group it together, and call this scene. If I click on this null and go to basic, I can go to icon and load a preset for an icon, and now it's just a little dot. That's kind of how I do it. The next thing I want to do is bake this down so that I don't have to keep hitting play every time. If I click on my cloner, I can go to my rigid body tag here, go to cache and hit cache scene. Okay, so now when I play this back, I can go forward and backward and it's going to be the same. Now, if I didn't cache it, when I try to go backward, it's just going to stick there at the ending. It's not going to work. For example, if I clear this out and I try to go back, it respects the plane effector, but none of the dynamics are there. So we want to bake this in. So I'll go ahead and hit cache scene again. Okay, so this is looking closer to my final result. I believe I had probably more cylinders on the final, so I might add just another glass cylinder in here and change it just a little bit. Make it a little bit thicker. Make sure that I have fillet caps on everything. So I'm going to select all my cylinders, go to caps, fillet caps, and that's going to round out the edges from being super hard on those shapes. I'll just keep it at like 1 and the segments are fine. So now that we have our cache scene, we can go ahead and set up our render to how we like it. So that includes adding depth of field, adding lens effects, adding different camera animations. So my first camera is this wide shot, and I'm just going to leave it like that for now. And I'm also going to cache this actual cloner object. So if I click on the cloner and I go to tags, simulation tag, or I'm sorry, MoGraph tags, and go to MoGraph cache, click on that and bake it. Now we should have a fully reversible dynamic simulation that we've baked into our cache. And that just kind of locks it in for us. So this is looking pretty decent. This is close to my original. Let's go ahead and hit play again so we can see it. Okay, so now's the time I would probably adjust my lighting just a little bit because it's still pretty flat. So I'm going to turn off my dome light and come in here over my viewport and hit the middle mouse, and that's going to go to my 4-panel view. And I can see all my different top, right, and left. You can see them labeled here. So I can just move around in this, hold down Alt and middle mouse click, and you can pan around. And let's see, I just want to come in here and adjust this light a little bit. Try to get it closer to my liking as far as the final result. Now remember that the bigger the light and the closer it is to the subject, the softer it's going to be. So if you want really soft light, this is a good option. Let's go back here into our main view and hit play again. Let's just see if that's any better. You can actually come in here and adjust this light on the fly while it's playing, and we can kind of see what that light's doing. That's looking a little better. What I'm mainly focused on is this glass because that's kind of the hardest to light. Those other materials are just going to be what they are, but let's add a little bit more intensity to this light. Okay, it's good. It's fine. Just going to come in here and tweak this. Spread you can turn down, and that'll kind of narrow down the focus of the light. You can see that. And then on this background plane, I'll call it BG. And the next thing we want to do is adjust our light so that it's not visible in this render, because right now we have a big square and we want that to go away. So click on your light and go down to camera and turn that all the way down to 0. Now the light's not visible to the camera, but it is visible to the diffuse. So if I turn this down, you can adjust how much that light is affecting the background and the objects. Now I'm just going to adjust this light just a bit more. And this is a lot of tweaking. Like if you don't get it right the first time, That's okay. It takes some time to like get lighting down, and getting things in the proper positions is important. So just keep working. And okay, go back to our light and go to cameras, use camera selected object. Now we can go ahead and move this around the scene. Let's try to get this whole stack and the background in one go, and a little bit of an angle, something like this. Now if we want to see this actual camera angle the entire time, we can just hit this lock button or come in here to RS Camera 1 and it'll lock it to that camera. So that's looking pretty good, and I don't even have my dome light on, so let's add the dome light. Okay, that's gonna fill. I'll call this fill, and I'll call this on key. Under the fill object, I'm going to pull this down just a little so it's not so crazy bright. Something like that. If you end up having issues with your animation not looking how you want, you can actually come in here and tweak the collision settings as far as friction, bounciness, and stickiness. Or you can just come in here and change these settings in the position here or the rotation, and that should help. Also adjusting your delay and push apart. If it's too slow, you can adjust your delay. Okay, so I think we're in a pretty good spot now. Let's test it out one more time just to see what we got. Okay, that's looking pretty good. That's looking good. Okay, so now we have our lighting pretty good. We have our materials pretty good. And I think the next thing we need to do is add some depth of field. And this is a lot of, like I said, it's a lot of trial and error because you're dealing with dynamics. It's not always going to look how you want. It's going to act up. It's just the nature of the beast. One thing I want to do is add a little bit more push apart and just see if that gets us closer, because right now everything's kind of congested and I want it to breathe a little bit. So there's a couple different ways you can do that. The push apart is going to help. So if I add that to like 75, that might be too much, but let's go ahead and bake it and see. Yeah, so now they're spreading apart a little bit more, and that's looking better. This is kind of the foundation of the effect. If I go into my camera, I can change my focal length to about 50. Back the camera up a little. Okay, that's looking pretty good. That's kind of the main effect. All right, so let's bake out the dynamics again. Cache scene. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now I can go forward and back and you can see it reverses. So the next thing I want to do is add some depth of field to my camera. So if I click on the camera and go to optical, crank the aperture to just like 1, and then click on bokeh. So I'll hit play again in my render. And right now you can't really see too much. So if I duplicate this camera and I move it around and get kind of close up on this, we should be able to see some depth here. Okay, that's definitely some depth. Click on this little box right here that does click for focus, and then you can click on the object you want to focus on and it'll adjust it. So now we're in focus. I'm going to drop my aperture just a little bit to like 0.5, maybe even 0.25. So now we have some pretty good depth there. That's more of what we're wanting. Okay, so I am going to adjust this orange. It's looking kind of dark. So if I go in here to this orange, click on this guy, bring it up just a little bit so it's not so dark. and hold down Shift and click and drag, and you can get your region. Turn off reflection, just turn it down just a little bit. And you can even add subsurface here if you want, just to add a little bit of depth to that material. And then under coat, I want to come in here, turn that up, and make sure coat reflection is plugged in. Coat roughness, there we go. Okay, so we got some subtle noise in there, and that's looking pretty good. We got some depth of field, we have our lighting set up, we have our animation baked. One little quick thing that I do pretty frequently is to add a camera to an animated element, and it'll actually lock that camera to the element. So if I come back here and hit play, so that camera is moving along with the linear field. And if I bring the camera up this way, we'll be able to see this, basically this point where these objects are being spawned. It's kind of a cool effect. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is add these cameras to our takes so that I can hit render on everything at the same time. The easiest way to do that is to go into main, under takes, and if you don't see this window, go to window take manager, right there. Okay, so we'll call this main, that's fine. I'm gonna hit this plus and make a child of this, and I'll call it RS camera. Oops. Camera 2, and then I'll make another one, RS camera. Okay. Now that I have those named, come over here to these drop downs, these little buttons, and make this camera 1, make this camera 2. So if you look at my render view, when I switch takes, it's going to switch to camera view because I have a specific camera selected for a specific take. Now if I go back to main, this is like my main project, right? Like everything's, I can still move and do things that I want to do, and it's not going to affect anything else. But these takes are really nice because I can checkbox these and go to render mark takes, and that's going to render through camera 1 and camera 2 based on Control B, my output frames. Okay. So you can go to Control B, or you can go to render settings. I never do it this way, so it took me a second. There we go. All frames 200. Another quick little thing are tokens. So I can name this render based on my project title, and I can name the actual project, the actual files named on my project title and my camera name. Okay, so I can change this to be named my camera, or I can name it my take, and that's basically going to create a render folder, name the folder whatever your project is named, and then the title of your file is going to be project take. So we'll leave that for now. Okay, so now when I go here and render mark takes, it's going to start rendering these and go through 1 and 2 cameras, and so it's going to start rendering these, and then it's going to cycle through the different takes and render both of my cameras for me. So pretty much you set up your cameras how you want them, where you want them, with the depth of field, make sure your animation's good, and then you can put them in takes and render them out this way. That's kind of how I set this project up. And hopefully you guys learned something here and this was helpful for you in some way. If you guys have questions at all, please feel free to reach out. I am going to add this project file to Gumroad or Patreon or something, and just to have it available for you. So look for that too in the link in the description, and I'll link to it. All right. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a good one, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.